Humanity recently spent, $10 billion to launch the James Webb Space Telescope?
Yeah, $10 billion. It's staggering.
Right, $10 billion just to send this thing 1,000,000 miles into the freezing vacuum of space. And we're looking at the very edges of the cosmos.
Staring at light that's literally billions of years old.
Exactly. Staring at ancient light, hoping to find, a hint of our origin, maybe even the meaning of it all.
Mm-hmm.
And it is this undeniable feat of engineering. But if you look at it from a different angle, it's also, it's this massive, glittering monument to human longing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's the ultimate search for connection, really.
Yeah.
We're looking outward into that dark void precisely because, collectively speaking, we feel so incredibly lost inward.
Wow, yeah.
We are desperately trying to find our place in the grand scheme of things, just, hoping the universe will just hand us an answer.
And that profound sense of being lost, that's exactly where we're starting today. You are listening to a custom-tailored deep dive into Rian Engelbrecht's 2022 book, Faith Under Fire.
It's a heavy one.
It really is. Now, our mission as your impartial guides is to map out Engelbrecht's core argument.
Right.
Which is that Christian truth isn't just quietly fading away. He argues it is under severe, coordinated attack from multiple fronts, and believers must actively defend it.
Yeah. He doesn't pull any punches, but, before we get into the high-tech threats like AI or...
his wild pop culture metaphors.
Right. The Matrix and Game of Thrones stuff.
We'll get there, I promise.
Yeah.
But first, we have to understand the battlefield. He argues we're currently living through a massive, self-inflicted existential crisis.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. Engelbrecht points to Simon and Garfunkel's classic song, The Sound of Silence.
Such a great track.
Classic. He says that opening line, hello darkness, my old friend, that perfectly captures modern man's baseline state of dread.
And he argues that this creeping dread, it isn't an accident. It's the direct mathematical result of a society systematically pushing divinity out of the public square.
So, cause and effect.
Exactly. When you remove a divine creator from the equation of reality, you don't just get neutrality.
Right. You don't just get a blank slate.
No, you're left with a massive sucking void. And Engelbrecht contrasts two very different worldviews to illustrate this.
Okay.
On one hand, he points to the late Stephen Hawking, the brilliant physicist searching for the theory of everything out there in the cosmos through black holes and relativity.
Right. And on the other hand, he points to the late evangelist Billy Graham.
Yeah.
Graham claimed to have already found that exact same theory of everything, but he found it right here in the divine.
And Engelbrecht points out a deep irony here.
It is.
Well, we're willing to spend $10 billion on a telescope to find the meaning of life in the stars, while he believes the evidence of God is already right in front of us.
And completely free.
Exactly. Completely free.
What's fascinating here is how Engelbrecht traces this modern emptiness back to a specific philosophical shift.
Oh, you mean existentialism?
Right. Specifically, the ideas of the French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. Sartre famously stated that existence precedes essence.
Yeah, that's a dense phrase.
I've always found it so dense. Let me see if I can translate that. So think about an IKEA chair.
Okay, an IKEA chair.
The essence of the chair, like the instruction manual, the blueprint, its purpose, that exists in the designer's mind before the physical chair ever exists.
Right. So essence precedes existence for the chair.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Sartre is saying that for humans, it's the exact opposite, right?
Yes, he's saying we just pop into existence first, randomly, with no blueprint.
No manual, no inherent purpose.
Precisely. You're basically handed a block of wood and told, figure it out. Sartre argued that it's entirely up to the individual to invent their own essence.
Their own moral code.
Right, and their own meaning.
Which, on paper, that sounds incredibly liberating. You get to be the author of your own story.
You're not boxed into any destiny.
Exactly. But Engelbrecht argues, he argues it's not actually liberating, is it?
No, it just sounds liberating.
Yeah.
Until you actually have to live it.
Yeah.
Think about the crushing anxiety of modern life. If there's no inherent design and no ultimate authority, then every single choice is entirely on your shoulders.
And ultimately kind of arbitrary.
Right. So Engelbrecht views this secular philosophy not as freedom, but as a trap.
He describes it as this dark labyrinth where modern man is just wandering around armed with nothing but a dying candle.
It's a bleak image. Because if you are solely responsible for creating your own meaning, what happens when you fail?
You fall apart.
He argues this inevitably leads to nihilism. The terrifying belief that life is entirely meaningless.
And that leaves people in this desperate, panicked search to fill the void with anything they can find.
Exactly. Anything to make the dread go away.
So if society is wandering blindly in this dark, terrifying labyrinth, natural logic dictates that the church should be the guiding light.
You would think so.
It should be the entity standing there with a map and a flashlight. But Engelbrecht makes a really hard pivot here.
Yeah, he really goes after the institution.
He argues that the institutional church is actually in a state of absolute mutiny and decay. It isn't rescuing anyone because it's too busy destroying itself.
And he lays the blame for this largely on a historical concept called sacerdotalism.
Sacerdotalism. Okay, break that down for us.
So the root of that word, sacerdos, means priest. It's the belief that you fundamentally need a special segregated class of clergy to act as mediators between everyday people and God.
Basically a theological middleman.
Exactly. Engelbrecht argues this creates an unbiblical division, one that keeps the laity, everyday believers in the spiritual dark ages.
Wow.
Yeah, because if you convince people that they can't sit at the table with God themselves, that they don't have the capacity to understand the text.
They become entirely reliant on a pastor's secondhand knowledge.
Right. The pastor becomes a toll booth to the divine. And when a congregation doesn't know the truth for themselves, they become incredibly easy to manipulate.
Which brings up the Charles Dickens metaphor he uses.
Oh, the Oliver Twist one.
Yes. He compares these modern congregations to Oliver Twist. You have all these everyday believers standing there with empty bowls saying, "Please, sir, I want some more."
They're spiritually malnourished.
Exactly. They are starving for deep, absolute truth.
Yeah.
But Engelbrecht says the leadership is just feeding them stale, watery porridge.
While gorging themselves on fame, book deals, and earthly prosperity.
It's brutal. And because the leadership is so focused on building their own empires, the church fractures.
This is where he brings in that surprisingly fitting Game of Thrones analogy.
I love this visual. He compares modern fractured church denominations to the seven kingdoms of Westeros.
It makes a lot of sense when you think about it.
Right. You have all these different factions, mega churches, ancient denominations, charismatic offshoots, and they're all just squabbling over power.
Wealth, cultural influence, running slick marketing campaigns.
Basically stealing sheep from each other's flocks just to boost their own numbers.
And what happens in Game of Thrones while all the human kings and queens are busy fighting over the Iron Throne?
They completely ignore the army of the dead marching down from the north to wipe them all out.
Exactly. In Engelbrecht's framework, the church is so distracted by internal politics and secular approval that it has completely forgotten the actual enemy.
The devil and the forces of spiritual darkness.
Right. He is particularly critical of what he calls seeker-friendly movements.
Okay, what does he mean by that?
He argues they've compromised absolute truths to appease secular culture, watering down the gospel so it doesn't offend anyone.
Incorporating New Age spirituality.
Yes, and turning church into a TED Talk with a light show.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here, though.
Okay.
If the porridge is really that bad, and the leadership is just playing political games, why do millions of believers tolerate it?
That's a great question.
Right. Like, if they are genuinely starving for truth, why stay in a system that is clearly compromised?
This raises an important point, and it really gets to the core of human psychology. Engelbrecht leans on the biblical concept of having itching ears.
Itching ears.
Yeah, the idea is that deep down, people actually want to hear things that validate their own fleshly desires and lifestyles.
Oh, I see.
The harsh, absolute truth of the gospel requires sacrifice, repentance, accountability. But these compromised churches, he calls them wolves in sheep's clothing, they preach a gospel of comfort.
Wealth and zero friction. Wait, I think I have an analogy for this.
Go for it.
This itching ears concept sounds exactly like how social media algorithms work today.
Oh, that's interesting. How so?
Think about it. You curate your feed on TikTok or Instagram, so it only shows you political opinions, lifestyle choices, and news that you already agree with.
You build a comfortable echo chamber.
Exactly. When a challenging or contradictory piece of information pops up, what do? You swipe away instantly.
Right.
Engelbrecht is essentially saying people are doing the exact same thing with their spirituality.
Yeah.
They're algorithmically curating their theology so they only hear comfortable lies.
That is a perfect modern translation of what he's describing. We willingly trade the friction of truth for the warm blanket of validation.
So let's connect the dots here. We have a secular society paralyzed by nihilism, staring into the void.
Yep.
And we have a church that is too busy fighting itself and feeding people comfortable lies to offer any real rescue.
It's a massive failure on both fronts.
Right. And because of this massive failure, humanity still has that gaping existential hole to fill.
And Engelbrecht argues we are now turning to incredibly dangerous alternative paths to achieve our own salvation.
We don't just want to be comforted anymore. We want to become gods ourselves.
This is where his argument bridges ancient mysticism with futuristic technology. It's wild. Let's start with the mysticism.
Okay.
He points to the current psychedelic renaissance. We are seeing a massive surge in the use of hallucinogens.
Like psilocybin, ayahuasca, DMT.
Right, being used to achieve spiritual awakenings or hack consciousness.
Yeah.
Engelbrecht traces this directly back to the ancient Greek concept of pharmakeia.
Okay, hold on. I have to push back on this a little.
Sure.
Pharmakeia is where we get the word pharmacy, obviously. But today, institutions like Johns Hopkins are running clinical trials showing that psychedelics can cure severe PTSD.
Right, treatment-resistant depression, addiction.
Yeah. Is Engelbrecht genuinely arguing that clinical medical therapy is just rebranded witchcraft?
Well, it is a controversial leap, absolutely. But you have to understand the specific mechanism he's critiquing.
Okay, explain that.
He isn't primarily attacking the biochemical treatment of a physical brain ailment. He's attacking the spiritual application of these substances.
Ah, I see the distinction.
In biblical times, pharmakeia referred to sorcery. Specifically, the use of mind-altering drugs to forcefully open doors to the spirit realm, bypassing God entirely.
So it's about the intent.
Exactly. Engelbrecht argues that when modern people use psychedelics to experience ego death or contact entities, they are engaging in ancient sorcery.
And he ties this to the New Age movement's push for monism and pantheism. Monism being the idea that the universe is just one unified substance.
Yeah.
And pantheism being the belief that everything in the universe is divine. Basically, everything is God.
Right. And here is the logical danger Engelbrecht sees. If the universe is God and you are made of the universe, then the ultimate realization is that you are God.
Oh, wow.
It shifts worship away from an external sovereign creator and directs it entirely inward toward the self.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because he takes that exact same spiritual desire, the arrogant desire to be a god, and points as squarely as Silicon Valley.
Yes, he talks about something called graphene technology,
Which stands for genetics, robotics, information technology, and nanotechnology.
science functioning as a mechanism for salvation.
Yes. He looks at cloning, cryonics, where people freeze their heads hoping to be revived, and this massive push for artificial intelligence.
But I imagine information technology felt a bit out of place there.
It did. I was struggling to see how something like the internet fits into this becoming a god framework. How does having Wi-Fi make someone divine?
Well, think about the classic attributes of a god.
Okay.
Omniscience, meaning all-knowing. Omnipresence, being everywhere at once. And omnipotence, being all-powerful.
Right.
What does a smartphone connected to the internet give you? A corrupted digital version of omniscience. You have access to all human knowledge instantly.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
What does social media and virtual reality give you? A digital omnipresence. You can project your avatar anywhere in the world simultaneously.
And artificial intelligence promises omnipotence.
Exactly. Machines that can solve any problem, cure any disease, and perhaps even conquer death.
So we're trying to build the attributes of divinity, but without submitting to divine morality.
Upgrading our hardware to cheat death.
He literally compares our pursuit of AI to the story of Frankenstein. We are so obsessed with creating life, with mimicking the creator, but because we fundamentally lack divine wisdom.
Our creation is going to inevitably turn on us.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Engelbrecht is deeply concerned with the ultimate goal of all this tech, transhumanism and the singularity.
And we have to remind people, this isn't science fiction. This is a stated goal of many real-world tech billionaires.
The idea that we will eventually merge human consciousness with machines, right?
Yes, leaving our fragile biological bodies behind. It's the pursuit of a post-human god.
But whether it's an ayahuasca retreat in the jungle or a microchip implanted in your brain in California, Engelbrecht views it as the exact same phenomenon.
He traces both paths all the way back to the very first lie ever told.
In Genesis.
Right. In the book of Genesis, the serpent doesn't tell Eve to become an atheist. The serpent tells her, if you eat this fruit, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God.
Wow.
Engelbrecht argues that every psychedelic trip aiming for enlightenment and every billion-dollar AI project aiming for immortality is just modern humanity biting the exact same apple.
Okay, that is a heavy, terrifying web he has laid out.
It really is.
You have secular philosophy trapping people in a meaningless maze. You have a church system that is too corrupt and comfortable to throw them a rope. And you have a desperate society turning to digital sorcery and artificial intelligence to save themselves. The walls are closing in.
They are.
So what does this all mean for the believer? How on earth does Engelbrecht say you are supposed to respond?
Well, to explain the way out, he uses one of the most famous cinematic metaphors of the last 30 years, the Matrix.
Oh, the battery metaphor.
Exactly.
In the movie, humanity is unknowingly trapped inside a massive, simulated reality, completely unaware that their actual physical bodies are plugged into a machine.
A machine that's draining their life force to power itself.
Engelbrecht argues that this is not fiction. He says it's an exact description of the modern spiritual condition.
People, even believers in compromised churches, are plugged into a matrix of worldly illusions, religious legalism, and secular distractions.
They think they are living free, autonomous lives.
But they're actually being drained of their spiritual vitality by false systems designed to keep them asleep.
And the only way out, just like for the character Neo, is to take the red pill.
Right. And in Engelbrecht's framework, taking the red pill means swallowing the absolute, uncompromised truth of the gospel.
Which is harsh. It's going to alienate you. It's going to rip you out of the comfortable simulation that your friends and coworkers are still happily living in.
But it is the only thing that actually wakes you up.
And his point is that once you are awake, your job isn't done.
No, you can't just sit there in the real world. You have to fight.
He uses these intense cinematic battle cries to inspire his readers. Like, he tells believers they need the intensity of William Wallace in Braveheart.
Screaming for true spiritual freedom.
Right. And he tells them to hang tough and refuse to stay down, like Rocky Balboa taking a beating in the ring but continually getting back up.
But we have to be exceptionally clear here because militant language in a religious context can easily be misunderstood.
Oh, absolutely.
Engelbrecht is calling strictly for spiritual warfare, not physical violence.
He is explicitly clear that the weapons of this fight are not physical swords or political coercion.
The warfare he is demanding is internal and spiritual. It requires believers to look critically at their own lives and rip out the IV tubes of what he calls artificial life support.
Okay, so what exactly qualifies as artificial life support in our daily lives?
It's the comforts of the world that we use to numb our existential dread.
Like what?
Well, it's the medications we abuse to quiet our anxiety. It's the constant stream of podcasts, videos, and music we pump into our ears so we never have to face the terrifying silence.
Wow, yeah.
It's the wealth we hoard to create a false sense of security. He argues we are kept artificially pacified by these systems because our spiritual hearts are failing.
So engaging in spiritual warfare means refusing to swallow the blue pill of ignorance and comfort anymore?
Exactly. And most importantly, it means actively speaking the uncompromised truth to pull other people out of the matrix.
You have to wake up the person next to you, even if they fight you, because they prefer the dream.
It's a huge task.
It is a massive, sweeping, and intense argument. To briefly recap the incredible ground we have covered today.
We've covered a lot.
We really have. We've looked at how mankind's frantic, panicked search for meaning takes many forms.
Right.
Whether it's pointing a $10 billion space telescope at the edge of the universe to figure out why we exist.
Or ingesting psychedelics to forcefully hack our own consciousness.
Or trying to cheat death and build our own omniscience with AI.
Or simply settling for a watered-down, algorithmically curated religion.
Engelbrecht views all of these as doomed, rebellious substitutes for divine truth. In his eyes, they're all just modern variations of the exact same ancient lie.
That man can be his own god.
And as we promised at the start, our role here is just to impartially report these themes found in the source text.
Right. We aren't here to tell you Engelbrecht is entirely right or entirely wrong.
But you have to admit, his worldview forces a severe reckoning with how we define progress, purpose, and reality.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And you, listening to this right now, might be sitting there wondering, why should I care about this specific theological critique? I'm not a theologian.
Right. Why does this matter to me?
You should care. Because whether or not you share a single one of Ryan Engelbrecht's religious views, you are swimming in the exact same cultural waters he is describing.
You interact with these forces every single day of your life.
Yeah. You are constantly navigating the promises and the encroaching threats of artificial intelligence in your workplace.
You're dealing with the societal fallout of secular philosophy, watching a whole generation struggle with the anxiety of having to invent their own meaning from scratch.
You see the massive institutional failures of modern religion
The cultural push for chemical enlightenment.
and the endless, exhausting distractions of the digital age. These aren't just abstract ideas in a 2022 book.
No, they're the literal push notifications arriving on your phone right now.
Which brings us to a final provocative thought to leave you with. Something for you to mull over long after this deep dive ends.
Engelbrecht warns heavily about Jurian technology, specifically the internet and artificial intelligence building the ultimate distraction.
A literal modern matrix. I want you to think about the very device you are using to listen to our voices right now.
It's a staggering marvel of human engineering.
But consider how much of your daily reality, your political opinions, your consumer desires, and even your truths are actually simulated.
How much of your worldview is quietly curated by invisible algorithms? Algorithms designed by corporations to keep you endlessly engaged, perfectly comfortable, and entirely plugged in.
In a world that is so meticulously engineered to keep us distracted and sedated, when was the last time you truly unplugged, sat in total silence, and sought out an unengineered absolute truth?
Are we just wandering Sartre's dark labyrinth, staring blankly at the glowing screens of our dying candles, completely unaware that the real answers remain obscured in the dark?
Think about it.